Changeling, a child believed to have been secretly substituted by fairies for the parent's real child in infancy. Bridget Boland from Ballyvedley in Tipperary, I'm probably saying that wrong, met Michael Cleary in Clonmel in 1885. He was from nearby Killinall. He was in his mid-20s and Bridget was about 16. This wouldn't have been unusual, obviously, at the time. They married in 1887, and then Bridget actually went back to Ballyvedley to look after her sick mother. And Michael, who was a cooper, which is like a barrel maker, stayed in Clonmel for a couple of years to, try save money. While at home, Bridget grew independence. She was a self-employed dressmaker and she also made some money by keeping hens and selling their eggs. After her mother died, Bridget had to look after her father, her elderly father. Now, her father was a labourer, so apparently there was like kind of cottages, slate roofed cottages and stuff, the better cottages would have been reserved for labourers. I don't really know why, but as a result, because they were going to be living with the father, who was a labourer, or who had been a labourer, Bridget and Michael were able to get one of these houses that were, kind of sought after. However, I have read that their house in particular wasn't sought after because it was allegedly built on a fairy fort. And the previous tenants had apparently left because they heard noises at night. The couple were not your typical peasants. They were both literate and ambitious. Bridget was described as strong-willed. She was well-dressed and she seemed to have an air of superiority about her, which other locals seemed to resent. She was said to be high-strung and difficult. The couple, who were at this point married for 8 years, had no children, but it is said that they both seemed happy. But obviously, that was a big thing at the time if you didn't have kids. They became friends with some of their Protestant neighbours, William and Mary Simpson. So this would have kind of given them a bit more of like a social status, I suppose. But obviously they were Protestant, and they would have been living on land that had been taken from Catholics. So again, this was just another reason for the locals to resent them. There was also, of course, a rumour of an affair between Bridget and William. In March 1885, Bridget was bringing some eggs. She was walking to somewhere to, give them into someone. And apparently it was a very bad day, so she actually caught a chill. So she went back home and got into bed. She then developed a fever and head pains. On the 9th, Michael actually travelled to Feathered to ask the local doctor there to come out and have a look, but he wouldn't show up until the 13th. I read something like that. He appeared drunk. He said that she was fine and he prescribed her some medication anyway, but Michael then was kind of annoyed because he had taken so long and he was drunk that he didn't really trust him, so he didn't give her these. I also heard from one source that he had said she was very emotional or emotionally distressed, and something about that she had mental problems before. Obviously, that's how they described them. So the same day, Bridget was obviously seemed to be getting worse. So Michael actually called for the priest, Father Cornelius Ryan, to perform the last rites, which is obviously a big thing if they think someone's gonna die. He then visited an old woman who done herbal cures and stuff, and gave him something called the seventh. So it was like a potion that was made by the seventh son of the seventh son of the seventh son. It was called the seventh. And Michael gave this to her that day, but she wasn't improving. Someone, I don't know if he was a neighbour or how they knew him, but for some reason this guy called Jack Dunn was at the house, and he was mad for all the fairy folklore. So he told Michael, that's not your wife, that's a changeling, that's a fairy. So Michael got this into his head then, that his wife was a changeling. So the following day, on the 14th, he travelled to see Dennis Gainey, who was a fairy doctor. And he gave him a concoction and some instructions on how to use it. And he headed home. Unfortunately, when he got back, he was told that his father had died and that the wake would be that night. But Michael thought that he couldn't go because, again, Jack was in his ear basically saying, you only have until midnight to do this. Otherwise, your wife is gone forever. Now, why he would know that by midnight, where'd you come up with that? But anyway, So that night in their house, in their cottage, there was about 11 people. So there was obviously Michael, Bridget, Jack, Bridget's aunt, Mary Kennedy, her three sons, who would have been Bridget's cousins, William, James, and Patrick, and then their sister, Joanna Burke, were all there, as was Bridget's father, Patrick Boland. At some point, the Simpsons knocked for Bridget. I don't know if where they knocked in to kind of see how she was doing or whatever. And they were apparently horrified at the scene that they came upon. Bridget's male cousins pinned her down on the bed, and Jack and Michael tried to get her to take the concoction. So it was like milk, foxglove, henbrain, and St. John's wort. And so she couldn't. She wouldn't take it, and she was saying no, it's too bitter. And so Michael basically forced it into her mouth and then covered her mouth so that she had no choice but to swallow it. They would then obviously repeatedly tell her to swear to God that she was the real Bridget Cleary. I read that she would reply and say, "I am Bridget Boland, daughter of Patrick Boland." So I think they kind of were, I don't know if they were accepting it or not. A pail of urine was then thrown over her. Michael then grabbed a red hot poker from the fire and waved it in his wife's face, accidentally, well, I don't know if it's accidentally, but burned her on, I think, her forehead. Apparently, the fairies have a fear of fire and iron. And again, was swearing, telling her to swear that she was Bridget Cleary. Her cousins then swung her up into the air and stuff, shaking her violently. She was cursed, told to go back from where she came from, this type of thing. And then she was brought over, I'm assuming by Michael and probably Jack, to the fire, to the chimney. And she was held over it, where her bum was held over the fire. So her nightdress started to smolder, started to burn. And so her bum started to burn. I don't know what other way to say that. When I was reading, it was like buttocks and stuff like this and bottom. I don't know, so I would just say bum. So anyway, so her bum just started was on fire, was being burnt. So obviously she was screaming, this type of thing. Again, she was told to swear that she was the real Bridget Cleary. By this point, she was obviously hysterical, and so they stopped and they put her into bed. I don't know if that's why they stopped, but they put her into bed. Her Aunt Mary changed her, and they washed her burns, and then just tried to soothe her. Bridget eventually fell asleep. The following day, Bridget actually seemed to improve a lot, and the priest actually came by to perform mass. He said that she seemed a lot more coherent than the last time he saw her, although she seemed very nervous and wild-eyed. She managed to be able to get out of bed and was able to speak to visitors. Obviously, she was not happy with her husband, and apparently was making fun of the fact that he had these suspicions that she was a fairy, and had said to him, the only one who went away with the fairies is your mother. So I don't think that went down well. So as it drew closer to midnight, again, magical midnight, the couple were having tea with some visitors. I don't know if that was the case back then. If now you were having you'd have people over maybe for a few drinks, that type of thing. Maybe that's what you done back then, because to just have people arrive at midnight for tea would be very weird. So I don't know. But again, I think there was tension building between the couple throughout the day, and so Michael then said she had to eat 3 dry pieces of bread before she was allowed to have tea. And after each one, she had to swear that she was the real Bridget Cleary. So she managed 2 pieces, and on the third one, she said her throat was too dry, that she wouldn't be able to swallow it. She needed a drink. This obviously just seemed to enrage Michael. He pushed her down onto the ground and he forced the bread into her mouth and told her to swallow it and swear. And she wouldn't. She wouldn't, or she couldn't. So Michael stripped his wife down to her chemise or her nightdress. The people who were there was about 8 or 9 people in the cottage at this stage. None of them said anything. None of them intervened. None of them protested. He once again grabbed a red hot stick from the fire and waved it in front of her face. He then set it to her nightdress and it went on fire. He took a lamp, one of the oil lamps, opened it and poured the oil onto his wife. Her body was now a ball of flames, and only at this point did her Aunt Mary try to intervene. Michael pushed her away, and then others started to protest. Michael went and locked the door of the cottage and then took out a knife, so all the visitors ran to the bedroom. He poured more oil onto her charred body. He then left the cottage, leaving the witnesses locked in. He went about a mile away and dug a shallow grave. When he came back, he made one of the cousins carry Bridget's body and they went and buried it. Only then, when he came back around 5 a.m., he let the visitors leave and told them, warned them that they weren't to say anything. For the next 3 nights, Michael Cleary held a vigil at a ring fort in Kyle He believed that his wife would appear on a grey horse, tied to a grey horse, and that he would then use his knife to cut her loose, and this would be his real wife coming back. Obviously, this did not happen. Within hours of, the killing, the murder, everyone knew what had happened, and the police were aware that Bridget's disappearance. Witnesses like the Simpsons were interviewed. So was Joanna Burke, Bridget's cousin, and she agreed to talk if she was spared any punishment for her involvement. So 5 days after the horrific killing, Michael Cleary and 8 others were arrested and charged with murder. Bridget's body would be found the following day. The trial was in July, and as part of it, the jury were actually brought to see the body. The body hadn't been buried yet, so to show them how horrific it was. Her right side, I read that her right side was so badly burned that her internal organs were actually protruding from it. So understandably, Michael was found guilty of manslaughter and he was charged with life. 6 other men were found guilty of wounding. This included Bridget's father, Patrick Boland. They got sentences from 6 months up to 5 years. The case was covered by Irish and British newspapers, and it didn't help. The British at the time would have had this very negative stereotype, of Ireland, of like savages, and that we were barbaric and all this stuff. And so I read that this obviously didn't help because it looked like all these peasants that dealt with witchcraft and stuff like this. Yeah. Michael spent 15 years in Maryborough prison, which is actually now Portlaoise prison, and then he moved to England. There were reports that after the killing, Michael spoke of, should he flee, to end his own life, to fake, being insane, this type of thing. So if you were to go by that, I don't know how much of the whole fairy thing he actually believed in then, and could the vigil have just been a show, So did Michael really believe it, or I don't know, was he fed up? Could he have been fed up that he had to look after his elderly father-in-law? His wife, that was supposed to be difficult. She didn't produce him any children, this type of thing. Even the resentment towards all that, the embarrassment of the rumors that his wife was having an affair, all this stuff. So did it all just build up? And when the excuse, I suppose, was given to him by Jack, of the fairy thing, is that why he bought into it, or did he truly believe? Because it was a big thing. It was mainly with children, but it did happen with older people. Did he really believe it? Another tragic case that I just wanted to mention as well is actually happened earlier, and this one was in Kerry. So this is one of the cases of where a child would be, accused of being a changeling. So in 1888, police arrived at a house or a farm in Beaufort, and they apparently had heard that there had been a shooting, and that's why they went. But when they walked into the yard, they found the horrific scene of 13-year-old Patrick Doyle lying dead in a pool of blood. He was only wearing a shirt. His head had been bludgeoned, and his face and neck had been disfigured. Apparently a pig had been feeding on him. When they went into the house, so there was the parents, Joanna and Michael Doyle, and then they had 4 adult children, so there was 3 daughters and a son, and then they had 3 younger children, aged between 7 and 12. So apparently when they went in, they were all acting hysterical. I read one thing, it said partially dressed or partially nude, and I don't know if they meant everyone or Michael, because it said and yeah, so I don't know if they meant, because Michael was the last person named in the source, so then they said who was partially nude, so I don't know if they just mean him. But yeah, so they were all holding like hooks and sights and stuff like that. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. Um, but yeah, so they were all acting apparently like raving lunatics. They resisted arrest and they had to be brought out by force. One rumor was that the family had eaten sheep that was infected with rabies. A nephew of Michael apparently said that he had gone there that day and been held hostage for some time until he was managed to get away. An inquest was held at Killarney Lunatic Asylum. Basically, Dr. Oscar Woods spoke about Joanna's confession in the inquest. So Joanna admitted that she killed her son. She said, I carried that fairy Patsy out into the yard. She called him a devil. She said that as long as he lived, there would be evil influences in their house. She took a hatchet and swung down on her son 3 times. She then went back inside and prayed and said that she went to heaven. While in custody, they all, fell to their knees. They were praying, wringing their hands. The daughters apparently tried to attack the father, so I don't really know what was going on there. Did they side with the mother maybe? Did they side, I don't know. Did they think that the dad should have done something? I don't know what happened there. There was a report that he was actually when they were in the house, he was in the corner, like looking like terrified. So the younger children, including Patrick, had been described as idiots. Obviously, at the time, people didn't really understand disabilities and additional needs and things like that. Patrick also was described as deaf and epileptic. So one of the things with the changelings is that, like, if there was like a problem with your child because things weren't known or understood, or maybe it was just so you could place a blame on something, it was considered like, oh, well, it's a changeling. Then it's not your real child, and so like that they would kill their child thinking that their real child, their perfect child, their good child would be returned from the fairies. All the adults apart from Michael were actually committed for a few months, but they were released then in July. Apparently Michael was considered not insane, he was just stupid. Joanna pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity in the trial that would follow, but she was found guilty. But because of the insanity plea, she was spared the death penalty and was imprisoned. So that is the case of some changelings, Bridget Cleary and Patsy Doyle. The stories are a bit mad sometimes when you read them. And the thing is, there'll be people who still believe those things, and very much so. I think it's a thing here you do not mess with the fairy forts and the ring forts and all this stuff. And I think, as far as I know, like farmers and stuff won't mess with them. If there's one on their land or anything, they don't touch it, they don't go near it. I don't know, yeah. It's just very sad that when I think of especially the children, these defenseless children who, just because they're different, are harmed or are actually killed, especially by people who are supposed to love and care for them no matter what. I just done this video kind of as an extra video for this week, so it's not as long, but yeah, what do you think about these, or other Irish traditions, I suppose? I'm actually not sure. I'll need to look up his changing specifically just in Ireland, or was it in like kind of, Scotland and stuff. The Scottish seem to have a few bits the same as us in terms of our history and our folklore. Yeah, but I hope you enjoyed it as an extra video anyway, and I will have another video next week. Yay. And yeah, that's kind of it. So thanks again for watching, and see you soon.